Hey, everybody, boys, girls, ladies, gentlemen, humans, dogs, cats. Welcome to Take the Black Live, one of several shows on the internet where we talk about all things sci-fi, fantasy, movies, TV, books, etc. I'm glad to see I'm glad to see everybody here. Hey, Martha. Hey, Julie. Andrew, fantasy fan, Robert. Y'all coming out. I love it. We'll start with really quick. I think Fantasy Fan complimented, Andrew complimented Daniel here. Because you're Daniel Roman, editor of WintersComing.net, and I'm
I
Dan Selcke,
I am.
WintersComing.net, and that's Coda, I assume,
Yes.
inspiration behind your editorship of WintersComing.net. Um,
Yep.
yeah, Daniel complimented you on your interview of Patrick Rothfuss yesterday, which I congratulate you too. That was a great interview of author Patrick Rothfuss.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, glad you enjoyed it, Andrew. We're going to talk about this today on the stream, but just a
Hmm.
little context for maybe anyone who didn't see it. I spoke to Patrick Rothfuss, author of the Kingkiller Chronicle. So that interview is up on the channel on YouTube. You can check it out. But yeah, we've got plenty of stuff to talk about today. So,
As
um,
always.
Dan, just gonna sit here and pet this cat. He's decided it's his stream today. What's first on the agenda, Dan?
All right, we are going to go to Westeros as always. The cat's name is Coda. Hi, Coda. Good to see you. You're looking very well. Um, and we have an explosive behind the scenes shot to share with everybody. Filming's over. They're wrapping up. They're editing all the new House of the Dragon episodes as we speak. And House of the Dragons, which is a Twitter account, X account, whatever you call it now, it still won't catch on. It's been posting a couple of behind the scenes shots, and this just looks great. This is a behind the scenes shot from House of the Dragon. There is fire exploding out of an entrance. Extras are being roasted, extra crispy. Um, it just looks like an exciting time to be on set. And let's talk first about what's going on here. So
Yeah.
I guess the honest answer is we're not 100% sure, but the smart money is on these people being a group of people who are trying to tame a dragon, probably the dragon Vermithor, who we met briefly in House of the Dragon season 1. We've talked before about how in the second season there will come a moment where Rhaenyra Targaryen wants more dragon riders on her side, so she puts out a call. Anybody who can tame one of these wild dragons we have hanging out here on Dragonstone can.
Uh, all right. I assumed I assumed that was me because I have Deep Woods internet. So anytime things freeze, I think it's me. But I think Dan might be frozen. So what he was saying, what we think is happening here, basically late in the Dance of the Dragons, Rhaenyra Targaryen puts out a call to try to get more dragon riders on her side. It's called the Sowing of the Seeds. It is a sequence we're really expecting to see in season 2. And basically, we think that what's happening here is some seeds getting crisped up barbecue style, because obviously not everyone who tries to ride a dragon will be able to do so successfully. Um, and yeah, so part of the reason that I think Dan was saying right before he disconnected, he thinks this could be Vermithor. So Vermithor was King Jaehaerys's dragon, the old king who preceded King Viserys. We saw him during the first scene of season 1. Vermithor has been riderless since Jaehaerys died. He's been just living on Dragonstone. We saw Daemon sing to him in the season 1 finale. And part of the reason that this is likely Vermithor, like that's the theory that we're kind of running with here, is because there's kind of these ornate pillars that we saw in the image where these people are getting roasted. And most of the dragons that the dragon seeds, as these hopeful dragon riders are called. Most of them are wild dragons, so living in caves, living out in the middle of, abandoned, isolated areas. Like there's the cannibal, who's a dragon known for attacking other dragons. There's sheep stealer, who, as the name implies, likes to eat the sheep of the people who live on Dragonstone. But this one, the fire here is coming out of a very clearly man-made structure. Another thought I had, seeing these pillars, I was kind of like, is that the dragon pit in King's Landing, which is the huge building in King's Landing where they keep dragons? But I went back and looked at the scene where Melees and Rhaenys fly out of the dragon pit in season 1, and that's a different entrance. It's a higher entrance with slightly different pillars. So this is an entrance we haven't seen before that I'm aware of. So yeah, that is something we are expecting to see next season. Martha asks, what is the lifespan of a dragon if it lives to an old age? I don't know this off the complete top of my head. Hundreds of years, at least, right? Because Vhagar in this season is 130-ish, 150. Vhagar's been around for quite a while by this point in time, because that was the dragon of Aegon the Conqueror's sister, Visenya. And yeah, Visenya, that was over 100 years before the House of the Dragon conflict. So yeah, dragons live hundreds of years. It's hard to say exactly what their lifespan is, because most dragons don't die of old age. So yeah, that's the House of the Dragon news for the day. There's not a lot going on, or not a lot of news coming out about House of the Dragon right now, because the show's kind of in the very tail end of production. It's a lot of stuff on studios and sound stages. This shot, it's interesting because I don't know who took this picture, because some of the early pictures we saw, a lot of them were because it was in public parks. So like all of the Battle of Rook's Rest pictures we've looked at, that's a public park, and that's why people were able to go in and take pictures of it. This one, it's not really clear if this is a soundstage. You can see a little bit of blue screen back there, so presumably they're going to CGI in more background. But yeah, so until House of the Dragon completely wraps, until we get a trailer, which we know there is a trailer because members of the press were shown one recently at an event in New York City. We're kind of in the waiting game here, and I think the news for House of the Dragon is going to kind of trickle down just a little bit until that trailer drops, and then we're likely going to start getting quite a bit more. But barring that, feel free to hit me with any House of the Dragon questions. We're going to keep going here, and we'll see when Dan is able to get back. But the next thing we're going to talk about, or I'm going to ramble about, so you guys in the comments, help me out here today. Feel free to pepper me with comments, questions, etc., so that it's not just a wall of me blabbering at you. But the next thing that we're going to talk about is that I spoke to the King Killer Chronicle, Patrick Rothfuss, or I guess it was last week. But the interview went up on our channel this week, and he has a new book out. So The Narrow Road Between Desires. This is the first new book in Patrick Rothfuss's King Killer Chronicle series in almost a decade. Hey, Dan is back. What's up there, Dan? How you doing?
Hey, everyone. So, I realized that life is funny, and sometimes it makes fools of us all. And usually on this show, when we have technical difficulties, generally speaking, Daniel is the one who has them. I had such high hopes for this stream. This time what happened was my internet is updating firmware. So it did that in the middle of Take the Black Weekly, which is a sacred space where you deserve the absolute best. I couldn't give that to you. And it booted me off, and I didn't know why. I've rejoined on a cellular hotspot.
The workaround.
which I hope is stable. It could go at any moment. So we're going to live on the edge here. I apologize.
Nice.
I pledge to do better. And this will never happen again. And if it does, you have the right to invoke martial law upon me. Daniel, Coda, what have I missed?
Yes. You missed us talking about those House of the Dragon photos. We talked a little about the sowing of the seeds, and kind of how news on House of the Dragon is starting to, it's a going down to a trickle, but we know there's a trailer that's out there that people have seen.
True.
And we're expecting that the news will ramp up at some point. But for now, we just mainly have that scene of stunt people getting sets on fire. And that's the news for the week. And we were just about to get into talking about Patrick Rothfuss.
It is some wonderful shots. I do like the drama of the huge things. Okay, let's move on. And that's mostly your camp. I'm sure you are already into it. I apologize again. Daniel, keep talking about Rothfuss and what you two did together.
Yeah, I will. I just need to say, it is kind of funny because, as Dan said, usually technical difficulties are on my end. So when he froze, I was just like, I'm frozen. I'm disconnected. I just assumed it was me. But yeah, so as I mentioned, Patrick Rothfuss's new book, The Narrow Road Between Desires, came out. Now, this is an interesting one because it's not a wholly new book. It's a reimagining of a novella that he released in 2014 called The Lightning Tree, that was part of this anthology called Rogues that he contributed to, that was edited by none other than A Song of Ice and Fire author George R. R. Martin and the absolutely legendary science fiction and fantasy editor Gardner Dozois, who was like the editor of Asimov's magazine for years and years. He's won so many awards, it's folly to even try to count them. But yeah, Martin and Dozois did a bunch of anthologies together, and Rothfuss contributed this story to one of them, and it's about Bast, and it's basically a day in the life of Bast. That's Kvothe's like Fae companion. This new version is like truly a new version of the story. So he kind of intended to just like clean up the language. He got a bunch of art done by Nate Taylor, who's the same person who did art for The Slow Regard of Silent Things, his novella about Ari. But instead, as I found talking to Patrick Rothfuss, as is typical kind of his style, he started doing this thing he expected to be a relatively small, easy thing. And then it became a much larger thing. And he basically like rewrote the whole thing. So this is like twice the length of the original. Every single scene has been just vastly improved, like to the point where I would never say like, go read The Lightning Tree instead. Like it really does make the old version like totally obsolete because it's just a much better version of the story. And there are even a few new scenes and some new magical elements he introduced that he told me could reappear in the main Kingkiller books whenever he gets back to writing The Doors of Stone. So yeah, that's what's up with Patrick Rothfuss. It was a really great interview. I really enjoyed talking with him. And yeah, do you have any questions about this, Dan? Because I feel like I've rambled about this quite a lot, but this book's out. Definitely recommend it for fans of his.
Well, first of all, I'll say that reading your interview and listening to it was very impressive because Patrick Rothfuss is a pretty big author, and the fact that you got it, that we got it for Wick, I think it's a nice little feather in our cap. And thanks to Mr. Rothfuss for deigning to do that. Yeah. It made me want to read the book. Honestly, I'll admit it wasn't really on my to-do list before this, but you made it sound like a real meaty, like worthwhile read. And Patrick Rothfuss always pays close attention to language and to prose and to text, which I think is always worth a look for someone interested in how to write pretty. I guess I can ask you, I think it's an obvious question. Patrick Rothfuss is best known for his Kingkiller Chronicles series, which chronicles the life of a king killer named Kvothe. I still don't know how to say it. And we've been waiting for the third
Same.
book in that series, The Doors of Stone, for as long as we've been waiting for The Winds of Winter. Did he say anything about
Mhm.
that?
Not really. And to be fair, we didn't really talk about it a whole lot. We stayed pretty focused on his new book.
Sure.
The main takeaway in regards to The Doors of Stone, which is the third King Killer book that, like you said, we've been waiting for pretty much the same exact amount of time as a
More
dance,
or less.
The Winds of Winter, whatever the one that we're waiting for from George. Um,
Hmm.
Basically what he said was that it was just really nice to be writing in this world again, which makes me think he did take some time off. He maybe needed to take some time off. And it was
Sure.
nice to be writing to a deadline again for a thing he was actively trying to release. Um, not something he's been stuck in a slog on for a decade. So the main takeaway was there are some things in this, and I don't want to make this sound like this is setting up the third King Killer Chronicle book. Like the new book is really a standalone, like small story about Bast. I believe it takes place just before the King Killer Chronicle books proper. Like it's before
Oh.
Chronicler has arrived in the town where he's being told the life story of Kvothe, which yeah, I still, even going into the interview, I was like, man, how do I pronounce this name right? There's a V next to a K. Um, but yeah, so the big takeaway is that there are some, especially magic systems. There's this thing called Embrals he introduced here, that's it's kind of like runes, like fortune telling that Fae
Hmm.
use, and that could cross over. He expects to use that again.
Right.
But yeah, I don't want anyone to come away from this thinking like, yes, this is this new heavy piece. Like it is still kind of a light, shorter story. It's standalone. You'll get the whole story in one 200-page book. Um, but it is like just the original Lightning Tree, I kind of felt was just like a off the wall, like Bast being Bast for a day. This one, it feels like
Hmm.
there's more meaning, like it's more of an actual story instead of just like a slice of life thing. So yeah, if you've missed, I just was so happy to be reading in this world again, and it felt like that. Picking it up, it's like, it's so nice to be reading a new story here, even though it's one I've read because I was already familiar with the Lightning Tree. But yeah, so that's the gist with that book.
Yeah, it's again one of those things I wasn't really considering reading before, but it has been a while since I've read anything by Patrick Rothfuss in this world, and it sounds like something worth getting.
Yeah.
And with the holiday season coming up, where I'll be off work for a bit, what better way than to spend the time than to get in front of a fire, have a mug of hot cocoa, put some Baileys in, and read The Narrow Road Between Desires. I think I seriously am considering getting that. True before the new
Cool.
year rings in.
Yeah, I mean, if like I said, if you've been missing his work, if you enjoyed reading his books before, like it's a nice way to spend a couple of days reading this book, I think. It's hard
Oh.
for me to imagine any fan of his reading it and like regretting it or being like, "Oh, that wasn't what I wanted." Like, unless your expectations are really off and you think it's going to give you all the secrets from book 3 he hasn't finished yet. Like, it's it is a nice new addition, and I've always wished this story got this kind of treatment, where it was a standalone book you could put on the shelf next to the Slow Regard of Silent Things. So
Sure.
yeah, I hope people enjoy it.
Yeah. Um, do you want to transition into the next topic? 'Cause I have a great segue if you do, or do you have more to say about Patrick Rothfuss and our exclusive interview with him about his new book in the King Killer series, The Narrow Road Between Desires, available to watch and read now on Winter is Coming YouTube and .net.
Yeah, I think all I'll say is just if you're interested in his work, the interview he talks about some stuff I've never heard him talk about in regards to like how the original Lightning Tree was made, how George R. R. Martin, like he tried to submit a story to George R. R. Martin for that anthology, and Martin was like, he
Yeah.
almost slipped into an impression of Martin where he was like, this isn't really a story, is it?
Hmm.
Um
I noticed that. I
so
noticed that when I listened to it.
yeah, he almost started slipping into it. I'm like, that's fun. So yeah, if you are interested in, Rothfuss doesn't do a ton of interviews.
Or impressions.
So it is, I definitely, I think if you're a fan of his work, you'll probably enjoy it. But Dan, what is your transition here into our next topic?
Thank you for asking, Daniel. First of all, yeah, I did hear it, and I did hear him as I was like, is his voice just going up, or is he trying to do an impression, or does everyone just do that when they talk about George R. R. Martin? I enjoyed that bit. My segue
Yeah.
is that Andrew has a good comment here, saying that Destin Daniel Cretton, who was going to be the director on Avengers: The Kang Dynasty, has departed the movie, which ties
Oh,
into a lot of rigmarole, I'll use that word, I don't care how strong it is, about the Marvel Cinematic Universe and how it's, depending on who you ask, either entering a new interesting phase or spinning out of control. We've heard a lot of things lately about how they're reorienting, about how they're going to have to do something because their movies are not doing terribly well, or at least not as much as they used to be. The Marvels
yeah.
came out, and we'll talk about it. I know, and I know you
Mhm.
enjoyed it, but it is
Mhm.
objectively a financial bomb and a pretty
Yeah.
big one. It sounds like I think it cost like $250 million, and it's made like 50 so far domestically, maybe more internationally. But it's
Mhm.
an open question whether that one will even make back its budget, which is not good for a major tentpole movie like this. They're saying that they might want to kind of branch away from this whole Kang the Conqueror storyline they're working on because A, Jonathan Majors has some personal scandal stuff, and B, no one's watching the movies that are building up to the big Kang stuff, so they don't really want to keep going forward with it. And the director of what the movie is, Avengers: The Kang Dynasty, departing definitely seems like more fuel to the fire, more evidence that things are changing for the worse, for the better. We can't know, but changing. So, Daniel,
Yeah.
keeping in mind all the crap I just said, you watched the Marvels over the weekend. I haven't seen it
Yes.
yet. I've heard some mixed things. I know you enjoyed it. Other folk I've talked to didn't enjoy it as
Mhm.
much. Um, what did you think of it? And do you see in it a mirror reflecting the turmoil and chaos at the heart of the Disney Corporation?
I mean, I think so. So there are a few. There's a lot to unpack with this, honestly. So yes, I think the box office performance of the Marvels is kind of indicative, I think, of the general public feeling toward the Marvel Cinematic Universe right now,
Yeah.
more than like the Marvels itself as a movie. Because like that's fair that like the reviews are kind of mixed on it. I think that's fair. Uh, I and it does have something working against it here, and I completely disagree with this. But I've seen these comments about
Uh-huh.
basically people bitching that it is a superhero movie led by women and it's
Mhm.
forgetting the men. Like that's an actual comment I have seen people make about this movie, which I
Okay.
loathe. I totally disagree with, but I do think like the original Captain Marvel kind of famously got backlash from like
Ooh,
that
yeah.
sector of the fandom. And I think we're seeing that a little bit here too. But I also think that Marvel has just burned a lot of goodwill with fans by expecting them to just turn out for anything, regardless of how good it is. Like Secret Invasion was a pretty clear like flop in every sense of the word to me. Like it
Yeah.
didn't seem to do well streaming wise. The show itself was not good at all, which like that's the first time for me with a Marvel show. I was just like, I'm tuning out. I'm gonna hate watch this drinking copiously because that's the only way I'm getting through this thing. And that was a Samuel L. Jackson led TV show with Amelia Clark. It should have been a hit. So there are those elements, and I do think that with the Marvels, it's a little bit of a shame because no matter how you slice it, the Marvels is not a bad movie.
Mhm.
Like I enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was just a really fun MCU movie. It feels like a team up movie. It is asking a bit of the audience because it has, you know, Kamala Khan and Monica Rambeau, so Iman Vellani and Teyonah Parris. They're
Mhm.
from Miss Marvel and WandaVision, respectively, and those are two TV shows. And they're teaming up with Brie Larson's Captain Marvel. And I think that it's a shame because the movie actually handles all of that really well. I don't
Mhm.
think, and it's hard because I am obviously biased because I've seen all of them. So I can't watch this
Sure.
imagining what it would be like having not said that, seen them, whatever. Um,
Red scene. It's all the
but
same. Use your senses.
yeah, having ingested them into my brain. But I thought that the movie did a really good job of dropping enough pertinent information to kind of fill you in on who these characters are without, you know, needing to get into the details of everything. I thought they felt like the same characters in a way that like Wanda, Scarlet Witch, didn't in Multiverse of
Right.
Madness. Like there was a noticeable disconnect from her WandaVision character and the Scarlet Witch in Multiverse of Madness. And I think this movie did it better. So this is probably the best example of Disney bringing over characters from its TV shows into a Marvel movie and having that go like the movie itself is pretty good. It's entertaining and it's fun and you know they kind of knew what they wanted to make and they made it. But yeah, I think fans are kind of fed up with Marvel a little bit right now. They're not giving it the same goodwill. And it's a shame because I think if this same exact movie came out 2 years ago, it would have been
Mhm.
really well received. So that to me is a sign that it's not really about the movie. It's about the state of Marvel Studios. And the stuff with Kang is a pretty good example of that. You know, that was the person they were setting up as the next Thanos. Now they're pivoting. I hadn't even seen the thing about Destin Daniel Cretton. What I
Brand
saw
new.
was that Jeff Loveness, yeah, apparently. So Jeff Loveness, who was writing the Kang Dynasty, Joanna Robinson, who wrote the book MCU: The Reign of Marvel Studios, which is excellent, by the way. I'm reading
I
that right
hear.
now. So good. Um, Jeff Loveness, who was writing the movie, he supposedly left the movie. So it seems like Kang is being put on ice, which is
Hmm.
unfortunate. Do you think they can what are your thoughts about that? Because that's a pretty big move to be like, maybe let's do a different big bad guy than the one we've been setting up for 2 years.
Oh, I'm not sure they're going to do a different big bad guy or bad guy at all. I wonder if they're completely rethinking everything, as in
Mm,
they may be thinking maybe a huge interconnected story is not something that was ever going to work twice. That
mm,
the assumption they had was that because I'll just go ahead and say the Infinity Saga was such a huge hit
nice.
that like that's our model. They like studios love patterns. They love to find something that works and do it over and over again. But um I don't think that was true. I think that hit because it came at the right time and it was new. That whole
Mhm.
like pouring tons of money into these giant action-oriented superhero temple movies was something that hadn't really been done before. And from Iron Man onwards, it was exciting and it built and it climaxed. And I think
Mhm.
they assume that folk are in this for the rest of their lives and
Yeah.
were wrong. Like people were in that because they loved that story and then they trailed off after it was done. Although they didn't trail off immediately, they trailed off because, and I think even they would acknowledge this, they flooded the market with too much stuff. They put out not
Yeah.
only a new Doctor Strange movie, but another TV show you kind of had to watch to understand why he was doing what he was doing in the new Doctor Strange movie. They put out not only a sequel to Captain Marvel, but a sequel to Captain Marvel that involved two other characters from two other TV shows. You didn't have to watch, of course, but it would help. Like I just watched Chris Stuckman's review of the Marvels before I came onto this thing, and this is a guy who watches, everything. He loves movies. He's a critic on YouTube. He loves going to the movies, loves watching TV shows, and he's like, I've fallen off more TV shows. I don't have the time to watch all of this stuff. I got to see other things too.
Yeah.
And if like, if like big movie fanatics aren't keeping up with it, there's no reason to assume that other folk are too. They had a great brand. They still have a good brand, but I guess they overvalued how much sway it really had. And they overextended themselves, and now they have to do something. Whether that's, if I were them, I would try something new. I wouldn't do a big new villain story that brought everyone together. I would try and make some good discrete movies. And if some of those end up being big hits, you can spin off into further things, chase that rabbit a little bit. But
yeah,
I feel like it's time for something new. And if they want to do an interconnected thing, it's going to have to be in a smaller scale. We have now proven that a bigger scale, the scale they did, is not going to work. So they have some thinking. Do they have some work to do? I'm sure they'll come out of it eventually. It's possible that, honest to God, it's possible that the collapse of the MCU will be big enough to reorient movies in general to something new. I mean, it reoriented them in the first place. It kind of not only brought about all these big Marvel movies that dominated the box office for the past 10 years and change, it inspired everyone else to do that. It inspired Sony to do that with Spider-Man. It inspired Warner Bros. To do that with DC movies. It inspired, more Transformers films, and it inspired all these cinematic universes. If that goes out of vogue in general, we could be entering a new era of movies, and I'm not sure anyone knows what that looks like yet.
Yeah, I think that is definitely fair. It is definitely staring at a moment where things could shift, and nobody really knows what that might look like on the other side. I don't know that would even be a bad thing, honestly, because the thing with Marvel, it's interesting hearing you talk about how maybe the interconnected storytelling isn't something that people are going to turn out for more, or things like that, because I think part of their issue here is they've done it too little. So in from the end of the Infinity Saga to now, there has been I don't remember the exact amount of hours of programming that they've released, but I know it's probably more than like the entire Infinity Saga, what we've gotten since then.
Right.
Between the television shows and the movies, like definitely. They have put out so much, and they haven't done an Avengers crossover movie since. So in some ways, those crossovers were kind of like what brought the audience and all these disparate plot threads together to keep propelling us forward. And we're not really getting that anymore. And now I agree with you that like going to another big bad, like that may be difficult. I've seen some people say the next thing they should be doing is Avengers versus X-Men, which is a very famous thing that the comics do. They have these whole runs of Avengers versus X-Men, and they're very popular. And the X-Men are still like the next thing. It does seem like they're clearly trying to bring in, without getting into spoilers or this or that. It doesn't seem like they've tabled X-Men. Deadpool 3 is now the only MCU movie on the slate for next year. And that is one that will firmly deal with X-Men stuff, hopefully, because it's starring two mutants. I don't know why it wouldn't. So yeah, it's interesting times for Marvel, and kind of like the perfect example of the oversaturation here. So the Loki finale also premiered last week, the day before the Marvels dropped. And I thought the Loki finale was excellent. I loved the way it ended. I was like, wow, this is really like very deep for a Marvel show, and really good for this character. Like, one of my qualms with the Thor movies is that like they're about Norse gods, and sometimes they feel like they really could care less about the mythological aspect of that. The finale of Loki felt like it struck that balance perfectly, where he was doing some stuff and it's like, this feels like God stuff you're doing here, but you're still these Marvel characters. But it hardly got room to breathe and be acclaimed on its own before this other movie comes out, and it's a box office flop. And you're right, objectively, it is flopping because 220 million, I think, to make it, another 100 million to promote it. it made around 110 million at the global box office its opening weekend, which is really low for a Marvel movie. Um, so I don't know. I don't know what the future holds for Marvel, but I know it's going through a reckoning right now.
I'm not sure really anybody does, which is both scary and exciting. The future of cinema, what does it look like? What does Martin Scorsese think about it? We'll find out all of these
Yeah,
things as we go on. The Loki finale was great. I agree with you. It was really, really strong. It was
yeah,
kind of resonant. It got me in the feels. It got me in the wow, holy crap, that's cool. Zzz.
yeah,
And you're right. It did feel like something a god would do, like on a more mythological level. And what are all these superhero movies
yeah,
if not just kind of old mythologies repackaged with Tom Hiddleston
yeah,
in a green costume. But yeah, we'll see. That's where we are with the
yeah,
Marvel stuff. I feel like we're all saying things that people have most said before. And what happens
yes,
next with the Kang stuff? Probably a pivot away, but we'll find out. Daniel, beyond
yeah.
the Marvels and Loki, what else you watching these days? And what are all you watching
Well,
out there?
yeah, hit us up in the comments and let us know what you're watching. The biggest thing that I have been watching lately has been Beacon 23, which is a new science fiction show that is premiering on MGM Plus, which, yes, that is a streaming service. You can watch things on it.
Always,
That's
always.
the same one that did The Winter King, which was that Bernard Cornwell show that just ended. Um, and while The Winter King, it sounds like, Dan, you were kind of disappointed in, I've been pleasantly surprised by how good Beacon 23 is. It's about these two people who are trapped on a lighthouse, a deep space lighthouse that guides ships through dangerous space terrain. And they kind of each have
Groovy.
their own shady agendas, and they're trying to, it deals with these ideas of isolation and kind of what that does to a person. Stars Lena Headey. She is amazing in this show. They really kind of gave her the reign. She steals every line, not even every scene, every line she has. It's like, God, I love watching Lena Headey. She's so good. So yeah, that's the big one I've been watching. Aside from that, I also watched most of Blue Eye Samurai. Thank you, everyone who recommended that last week.
Uh-huh.
And
This is
damn,
good.
what a show! Blue Eye
Yeah.
Samurai is great.
Huh.
Yeah, so it's this animated series on Netflix, and it's about this woman samurai who her mother was sexually assaulted by one of the four white men in Japan who are arms dealers in feudal Japan at this time. So
Okay.
she sets out on a quest for vengeance, basically. And it's
Classic.
very graphic, it's very violent. The animation is excellent, the storytelling is really good. Yeah, that show, there's something special about that show. So yeah, those are the main things I've been watching. Good stuff. What about you,
Very
Dan?
cool. Yep. I've heard nothing but good things about Blue Eyed Samurai. I may check it out. I'm still watching Invincible, which I still recommend. Great superhero
Nice.
show on Amazon. Very different. It's not Marvel. It's something different. I swear. That thing's great. For All
Yeah.
Mankind, Apple TV Plus. Apple TV Plus is one of those services that doesn't seem to be at the moment kind of jacking prices, adding ad tiers, scrambling, but give it time.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
which is still good. This kind of a alternate history show. They're in the early 2000s now of how that would be different. Gore wins in this reality over Bush, FYI. That's how they
Ah,
go back and do that. So that's been fun. And I also started
gotcha.
watching because I watched the first season of this show back when it aired on HBO a couple of years ago, and I was morbidly upset by it then, but still curious, and I feel the same way now. I picked up The Gilded Age on HBO, which is this
Okay.
Julian Fellows what if Downton Abbey was in America sort of show about turn of the century really rich people in Manhattan having really rich problems and going to high teas and arranging balls and galas and coming out parties to find their footing in society and crushing unions, and everyone's really well dressed and really well photographed. Um, it's it is well-mannered wealth pornography, I guess is the best way I can describe it. But there is something classic about that sort of British drama, and it is a British drama. I don't care if Christine Baranski's in it and talking in an American accent. It's a British chamber drama with like American accents. It's Downton Abbey in America. That's what it is. And everyone talks the same sort of very kind of clipped, stylized way. Everyone has the same sort of concerns. If you like Downton Abbey, you'll like this. I feel like the times have shifted since Downton Abbey is on, and something about this show just feels almost uncomfortable to watch. Like this sort of just unironic lauding and like worship of these incredibly rich people having their people problems. It feels a little distasteful in a way that it didn't like 10 years ago. But I am watching it, so it's doing something right. And Christine Baranski can deliver a sassy one-liner. So that's the Gilded Age.
Okay. Gotcha. It sounds this, you talked about this when I guess season 1 was on, that it kind of feels
and I had the same
wealth
feelings.
porn a little bit.
Yeah,
it is interesting to think about, like, have we reached a point where a show like that goes over less well? I mean, I wonder what like the Regency drama crowd would think of something like the Gilded Age. It feels like the kind of thing that might appeal there, but I mean, I have zero. Yeah, it seems like it could be for them.
It also irritates me a little bit that, again, it's like you could have had Warrior on HBO, but you put it on HBO Max and you put The Idol instead. And you could have Our Flag Means Death on HBO rather than The Gilded Age, put that on Max instead. I wish they would flip these things. I don't know why like these get like the primetime HBO slots, and some of the, in my opinion, better stuff is getting kind of not burned off, but released to less fanfare on Max.
There is, I assume there are contractual reasons. Maybe they'd have to pay people more if they put it on HBO. But it is a shame. Like, it's a shame to see shows like Warrior and Our Flag Means Death and Raised by Wolves. I'll always stand
Raised by Wolves
get put to, Raised by Wolves was like one of the flagship shows of Max when it first launched. It was their like best original series, and it got canceled a season later. And it's like, man, I wonder, in another universe, Al Gore won the presidency and HBO released these shows on HBO instead of just on Max, and who knows how different things might have been. So yeah, that's fair. Andrew says he's watching Goosebumps, the Santa Clauses season 2, and Blue Eye Samurai. Good choice there. So is there anything else you're watching? I have a couple of books I want to talk about very quickly before we get into our lightning round.
I could just say that a couple people are watching Fear the Walking Dead, which I don't think I've seen one person who seems to be enjoying. So if you're on that train, a grateful nation salutes you for your sacrifice.
Yeah, it's interesting times for The Walking Dead. I think their other spin-offs have done, like, I was a little surprised by how well they went over with everyone, just because I felt like they really tanked their series finale to set up all these spin-offs. But like Dead City,
right.
Daryl Dixon, like they're relatively solid, but it sounds like Fear the Walking Dead is struggling. So sorry to Julie and Robert and everyone else who's watching those. But so beyond shows, I think I talked about this book a few weeks ago. I'm finally getting around to finishing it. These Burning Stars by Bethany Jacobs. This is another revenge type story. It's a sci-fi, so think like Dune type story, with space clerics on a quest for revenge, trying to uncover these deep hypocritical mysteries about the way their society was formed on the backs of a genocide. And some people want to cover it up. Some people want to expose it. Some people just want to cause chaos. So really enjoying that. If you like N.K. Jemisin, like those types of books, might be one to check out. And that one's out. The other one, so this came in the mail yesterday. I'm going to be reviewing this on the site at some point. I've never reviewed one of these before. The Witcher Cookbook. The Witcher Cookbook showed up. And yeah, this
Nice.
is recipes. So these are from the game. They're not from the television show.
Okay.
And this book, one, it's a beautiful book. It's kind of in the vein of like a Feast of Ice and Fire, those types of like tie-in cookbooks. They split it up similarly by region, so you can do recipes from Skellige or Novigrad or Kaer Morhen.
Mhm.
The recipes are a little intimidating. I'm not gonna lie. Some of them have a whole lot of ingredients.
Hmm.
Julie says, "Open it, please." Let me see if I can flip to the artwork. The pictures in this thing are gorgeous. There are all these sorts of pictures of these
Cool.
delicious looking medieval style meals. And they have interestingly um like Eastern European flair and style to these things, because that is culturally where The Witcher is from. You
Sure.
know, Andrzej Sapkowski is Polish. But yeah, so yeah, this is an interesting book. Definitely, I think for like Witcher fans who also know how to cook, you'd probably enjoy this. But yeah, I got to get my chef game on to see how these recipes turn out to review that thing. So yeah, that's what's going on in Bookland for right now. Um,
Love it.
Anything else you want to hit up before we do our world famous lightning round?
I do have a quick question for you. You cook, right? I think you mentioned
Yes,
cooking before. So okay,
I
so
do.
like if you're intimidated by these recipes, that they must be at least like at an intermediate level.
Yes, that is, yeah. So thank you for that. Yes, I do a fair amount of cooking. I've made a lot of recipes from A Feast of Ice and Fire, other cookbooks. So when I say this,
Cool.
it's not like I make ramen noodles and now I'm looking at my first cookbook. It's like I use cookbooks like not like regularly enough that looking at this, I'm like,
Sure.
oh, this has, 20 to 30 ingredients. That's a lot of ingredients for a recipe. This is going to be
That
somewhat
is.
complicated. I did not know that they ate so damn well in Velen. Rat stew and whatever. But yeah, no, it's a gorgeous book. I am looking forward. Anytime you get a cookbook like this, you kind of have to flip through and see which ones are really challenging and which ones you can kind of make on the fly a little bit more. So, but
Sure.
yeah, I would say at least intermediate, some of these recipes.
Very nice. Love it. All right, let's do that lightning round, Daniel. It's been an interesting
Okay.
show, but we're gonna end it with a strike of excitement. All
Ooh.
right, let's hit it. Ask me first because I think you'll have more opinions on the second one.
Okay. So The Boys, Amazon's
Mhm.
subversive superhero show, will return in 2024, and it will pick up a couple of days after the events of the spin-off Gen V.
Yeah, The Boys, I've liked every season of it. I want to see more of it. I'm a little concerned with all our talk about superhero franchises overextending themselves, that even asking a little bit of the audience, even putting a little bit of the plot in this Gen V spinoff is going to make the next season, I don't know, a little harder to digest easily. But they haven't got it wrong yet, so
Yeah,
I'm willing to give it a chance. All right, Daniel.
that's
Speaking
fair.
of the
Yes.
Witcher cookbooks and the Witcher in general, there is a Witcher anime movie coming to Netflix. It's called Sirens of the
Yeah.
Deep, and it stars Doug Cockle as Geralt of Rivia. Who's that?
Yeah, so Doug Cockle is the voice of Geralt in the video games. He is voicing Geralt for this new anime movie, Sirens of the Deep, coming out, I believe, late next year, fall 2024. And that is based on one of the short stories from Sepkov's from the author's book, Sword of Destiny, that did not make it into season one. Geralt and Merman. It's his version of the Little Mermaid.
Good
I
pitch.
really hope that's good. That looks promising, and thank you.
Nice.
Um, so Dan, the Office creator, Greg Daniels, I
Mm-hmm.
think,
Yeah,
doesn't want to do a reboot. Not interested, but he's open to a Mandalorian style sister show. What does that mean?
there have been other reports lately about Greg Daniels wanting to do like a full-on reboot, like The Home Office is what I heard. So he got asked, like, is that true? And he's like, no, but we'll do a Mandalorian style show, which I guess means like I don't know, like The Office, but it's a different set of characters in like a cannery or something, or a different business in a different part of the world going about their daily humdrum lives. Um, I think you just leave it alone in general, but that's just me. We're doing a good job today.
Yeah, I think that's
All
that's
right.
fair.
Daniel, Avatar. By the way, Netflix released like 30,000 trailers over the weekend, which is where a lot of these things come from because they had a big event.
Yeah.
For example, they released a trailer for their live action remake of Avatar: The Last Airbender, which is coming out on Netflix on February 22nd of 2024. A lot of twos and a four. How do you think about that?
I feel. Wait, are you asking me? I thought I. Yes, you are
What?
asking me.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm confused, apparently, is how I feel. The trailer looked pretty cool,
it did.
and
Yeah.
they did a good job with One Piece. I still am nervous just knowing the original creators departed over creative differences, but I am more excited and hopeful than I have been yet for this series because that trailer was pretty damn cool. So, yeah, February, Netflix is gonna have a good start to the year next year. And speaking of Netflix's good start to the year,
Mhm.
so a month after Avatar: The Last Airbender premieres on
What do we got
Netflix,
next?
it will be dropping The Three Body Problem, based on the work of Xijin Liu. It is a hugely popular Chinese science fiction series that David Benioff and Dan Weiss of Game of Thrones fame, they are making for Netflix. It's coming out on March 21st, 2024. What do you
Mhm.
think, Dan?
I
I
read the
rambled a lot,
book
sorry.
to prepare for this, and I'm excited. I mean, A, because it is a cool story that has like a sort of misanthropic take on sci-fi that can be very dark and very interesting and very gritty. And also because Benioff and Weiss, Game of Thrones guys, are gonna do something huge for the first time since Game of Thrones. I'm curious about how it's gonna be received. I'm curious about what the narrative's gonna be. I'm curious if the show's gonna be good. I'm looking forward to it. I will watch it. We'll be there. March. Be there or be
Yeah.
square. Let's see. Next up, Daniel. Um, I'll skip to the end here because I know you want to do this one. Netflix is making a
Yeah.
Terminator anime.
Yeah,
That.
that's all we know. It's Terminator. It's an anime. It'll be on Netflix. Netflix hasn't revealed like any other details for this thing, just that it exists and we will get to watch it at some point. I like Terminator, so I'm cool with that. I'd watch a brutal, bloody Terminator anime, and Netflix is doing pretty well, I think, with adult anime
Yeah,
series. So I'll give that a chance, I think. So
maybe.
Dan, all right, let me ask you this one then, because I
Whichever.
think you know a little more about this guy. So Netflix, this is just the Netflix lightning round. Like,
It
let's be
is.
real here. Uh, they are making a Dead Boy detective series, which is also probably coming out in 2024. And I'd never even heard of that before this announcement. So what even is that?
Again, this is like under the heading of shared universe fear because Dead Boy Detectives is
Yeah.
a spin-off of the Sandman, and they have a Sandman show, and it's quite good, and I liked it. They would make a second season. I want more, and they're already just like the way they make a show and then immediately go like, "What can we spin off of this?" Is I don't know. It's a little alarming. It's a Neil Gaiman comic. It's good, but it's a little alarming. And finally, Daniel,
Yeah.
just here's another thing about a Netflix anime for you because that's what Netflix is all about these days. They are releasing a live action version of the popular anime I have never seen called Yu Yu Hakusho on December 14th. Do you know anything about that?
Wow, December 14th. That's like a month from now. I know that I'm
It
shocked
is.
that it's that soon. I assumed that was like way next year. Yeah, so that's a very popular anime. Netflix's MO, they're doing another live action adaptation. Can they make lightning strike in a bottle twice this year with that in One Piece? I'm real skeptical. Apparently, this one you told me, Dan, is also about a dead boy who becomes a detective. So
Mm-hmm.
that's fun,
Netflix has a type. But yeah, what's happening?
I
Thanks for
guess.
sticking with thanks for sticking with everybody. I know that was sorry again for the technical difficulties. We'll do our utmost to keep that
Made it
from
exciting.
recurring. I agree with you. I do. Um, But if you can see it in your heart to give us a like or subscribe anyway, we'd appreciate it. We air the show every Wednesday at 2 p.m. CST on the Windows Screen Facebook and YouTube page. And we're, of course, available to download wherever you download podcasts, Google Play, iTunes, or elsewhere. Again, we really appreciate a like and a subscribe, and we'll keep everything difficult to a minimum. And we'll see you here next week on Take the Black, where technical difficulties only remind you of how exciting life can be.
Oh, yeah.